Imagine stepping into a world where the air is thick with the stench of human waste, where the streets are so narrow that you can almost touch the buildings on either side with outstretched arms, where the darkness of night is so complete that it feels like a living thing, ready to swallow you whole. This is the world of the medieval town, a place where life was hard and danger lurked around every corner. But despite the filth and the fear, this was a time of great change, a time when old ways were giving way to new, and the world as people knew it was being transformed. In the heart of this medieval town stood the donjon, a towering fortress that was the last line of defense against invaders. But it was the town's walls that were the true guardians, the first and most crucial line of defense. The smaller the circumference of these walls, the safer and cheaper the town was to defend. Every inch of land within these walls was invaluable, and no space could be wasted. The streets twisted and turned, as narrow as the breadth of a man's shoulders, and pedestrians often bore bruises from bumping into each other. There was no paving on the streets, and shops opened directly onto them, contributing to the filth. Excrement, urine, and offal were simply thrown out of windows, adding to the already overwhelming stench. Despite the darkness and the dirt, the town was a place of vibrant life. The second story of each building jutted out over the first, the third over the second, and so on, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. At the top, the buildings were so close that burghers could reach across and shake hands with their neighbors. Rain rarely fell on pedestrians, which they appreciated, but little air or light reached the ground, which they did not. At night, the town was especially scary. Watchmen patrolled the streets, and heavy chains were stretched across street entrances to prevent thieves from escaping. Despite these precautions, rogues still lurked in the dark corners, ready to pounce on unsuspecting victims. One neighborhood in the town offered a glimpse of the changing times. Here, signs of a new era were visible to those who could read them. There were streets dedicated to different trades: the butcher's lane, the papermaker's street, tanner's row, cobbler's shops, and even a small bookshop. These were the hubs of medieval business, the places where a new class of people, the merchants, was emerging. Europe had developed a new class of powerful individuals who were reshaping the economic landscape. Cities like Venice, Naples, and Milan were the early centers of trade. But soon, the Medicis of Florence entered the world of banking. The Hanseatic League, a powerful alliance of German towns, eventually dominated trade, overtaking the others. The Hanseatic League, or Hansa, was originally formed in the 13th century to combat piracy and overcome foreign trade restrictions. It reached its peak when a new generation of rich traders and bankers came to power. The Fugger family, originally peasant weavers from Augsburg, rose to become one of the most influential families in Europe. They expanded into mining, extracting silver, copper, and mercury, and became immensely wealthy as moneylenders. Their influence stretched from Rome to Budapest, from Lisbon to Danzig, and even to the far reaches of Moscow and Chile. They loaned millions of ducats to kings, cardinals, and the Holy Roman Emperor, financing wars, propping up popes, and funding new adventures. For example, they provided the money that King Carlos of Spain used to commission Magellan's voyage around the world. Jakob Fugger II, the family patriarch, emerged as a powerful figure in 1505 when he secretly bought the crown jewels of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. In 1514, Emperor Maximilian I recognized the Fuggers' role as his chief financial supporter by making Jakob a hereditary knight of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1516, Jakob made Henry VIII of England a Fugger ally through complex loans. The Fuggers' influence was so great that a year later, the Church's Fifth Lateran Council lifted its age-old prohibition on usury, a significant shift in the Church's stance. In every European town of any size, there was a miniature Fugger, a merchant whose home in the marketplace rose 5 stories high, built with beams filled in with stucco, mortar, and laths. These homes were filled with expensive oriental rugs and containers of powdered spices, and clerks pored over accounts at high desks. The merchants and their wives, though of peasant birth, wore gold lace and even ignored laws forbidding anyone not nobly born to wear furs. They chatted with patrician customers as if they were equals, a subtle but significant shift in the social hierarchy. Impoverished knights, resenting this change, ambushed merchants in the forest and cut off their right hands. However, this was a futile gesture. Commerce had arrived to stay, and the knights were losing their power. The true rivals of the mercantile class were the clerics, and the bourgeois were gradually replacing the clergy in the power structure. Despite the growing influence of merchants in the towns, the vast majority of Europe's population lived in the countryside. In the early 1500s, one could hike through the woods for days without encountering a settlement of any size. Between 80 and 90% of the population were peasants, living in small, cramped hamlets surrounded by endless woodlands. They worked in the fields and pastures, entire families, including expectant mothers and toddlers, toiling to keep the wolf from the door. Wheat had to be beaten out by flails, and not everyone owned a plowshare. Those who didn't borrow or rent when possible, and when it was impossible, they broke the earth awkwardly with mattocks. Knights, on the other hand, experienced none of this hardship. In their castles, or now that the cannon had rendered castle defenses obsolete, their new manor houses they played games like backgammon, chess, and checkers. Hunting, hawking, and falconry were their outdoor passions. Their homes were uncomfortable by modern standards, damp, cold, and reeking from primitive sanitation. But they were also spacious and attractive, with timbered ceilings and large rooms. The medieval fair was a vibrant event, a break from the monotony of daily life. Customers, cloth merchants, beggars, drapers' shops, money weighers, and mountebanks all mingled in a colorful and chaotic scene. The fair was a place of commerce and entertainment, a microcosm of the changing world where the old feudal system was giving way to a new mercantile class. In this world of transition, the medieval town was a crucible of change. It was a place where the old and the new collided, where the stench of human waste and the promise of new opportunities coexisted. The town was a symbol of the broader transformation taking place in Europe, a transformation that would eventually lead to the modern world we know today. Despite the hardships and the filth, the medieval town was a place of resilience, a place where people adapted and thrived, paving the way for the future.